Boy, this is really, I'm kind of awed and honored to be in such incredible company. Thank you all so much. It's just, I've been totally moved and inspired, and it's great to be here with you too. My name is Adam Phillips. I'm a New York City celebrant. I love poetry, and I just want to talk briefly, hopefully, about poetry, the poetic themes and ceremony, I think is the title I was given. And I want to say that there's a lot about poetry and ceremony that sort of come together in my conception. Both are containers. That's really important. That's something Cindy really talked a lot about. And it's really true. In both ceremony, especially ceremony that involves or affirms or celebrates or makes more intense a moment in our lives, which by definition becomes sacred because we're giving our sacred attention to it, dangerous emotions can be expressed. I mean, there's a lot of dangerous things that when you really, really, really feel the heat of life, it's like, whoa, and so part of my job as a celebrant, I feel, is to be able to get as close as we can to those energies without getting hurt or singed, and do it all together in a way that makes us feel intimate and safe. And poetry is an art form that does that. And it does that through language, and it does that through speech, which is another thing that's really important about ceremony. I mean, of course, music can do that as well, but I mean, not through speech, but it's another way of getting at a reality. So they're both containers, and that's important. Both are very compressed. I always think of ceremonies being like an entire life, like in 45 minutes, like we're all on the back of this turtle going through space together, and we're love being there, and we couldn't be any other place, and we've always been there. And it's just a moment where we recognize that according to the theme and the personality of the couple and that kind of thing. Billy Collins, poet, many people may be familiar with him, likens poetry. He actually talked about physics. He said, if you took every single atom in this match that I'm holding and released the energy at that moment, it would like lift a mountain 20 miles across, up into the air. There's so much energy in that thing that's not being released. But if you did, like kablooey, right? Well, poetry, he says, is the same way. You take each word, and each of those words is like, bam! It's just like, so we have to realize that we're holding that wonderful tool and that power when we use poetry. I think of that as being a compressed thing. Now, one thing that's interesting to me about poetry is how it kind of bridges these different kinds of worlds and ways of knowing. Let me see if I can sort of explain what I mean. When a poet has a vivid and intense experience or an insight of life, like a heightened awareness of a certain moment in his life, and it's always very specific if it's good poetry, that's in the poem. But it is also, in a very beautifully realized poem, and a myth also, I might add, and that goes to the storytelling thing, we sort of smell the perfume, I like to think of it as, a vasana is actually a Hindu word, of his life in our life. That there's something that we, in a very beautifully conceived poem, it's very specific, and also we kind of get that part of it. That's also a community building experience, because we're all there. So there's sort of, it mediates between the kind of the vividness of a very heightened moment and the personal and sort of moon-like quality of a dream with a community awareness. And memory is really, really important. And in Greek mythology, the mother of the muses' poetry is memory. And she's the goddess of the first hours. So there's a sense, at least in the Greek myths, of time and transformation. And remember from your celebrancy class that it's all about transformation, very often. And you have this sort of countervailing sense of community memory and a cultural experience. I mean, I know this is a bit abstract, but I feel like it's true. So without memory, it would be chaotic. And we kind of remember who we are in a wedding, in a family or a tribe, even a nation, with the inaugural poem. So it combines a personal reality with an abiding truth, like love, mortality, as transience, family, community, God. Remember that word that we always have to keep in quotes in our work. So it's a way for us to transform safely together. So there are certain poems that kind of work in any ceremony, I find, because we are remembering at the same time as we are in this moment. And one I often use is from T.S. Eliot, and by the way, short is always good. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Now that's true of death, it's true of love, it's true of anything. We've been there before, and now we're there again together, and we bring that out in a way that's positive, I guess, as celebrants. Now, there's also ways of combining, we're talking about intercultural weddings, there's also ways of using religion. I loved what she said about using some, like St. Paul. I mean, so much religious poetry and spiritual liturgy is poetry. And that's the very, very, very best that we have often is the sacred stuff. And so there's lots of good ways of insinuating love and sex into religion. For example, in the Song of Songs, people know, thy lips are like a thread of scarlet, and thy speech is comely, thy temples are like a piece of pomegranate within thy locks. Thy two breasts are like two young roes that are twins, which feed among the lilies. I mean, it starts to get warm in here really quickly, and it's the Bible, you know? So, like, what could be more kosher than that? There's a divorce ritual. Now, I'm really into Japanese poetry lately because it's short. And one other thing I wanted to say is that since the poems kind of follow life cycles very often, we can look to nature and nature poetry to express these things. There's also love and birds and bees, and that's nature, as nature as you can get. And, you know, there's brown leaves too, and that's a funeral for you. So, for example, divorce. There's a beautiful one by, I think this was written in the 11th century. How invisibly it changes color in this world, the flower of the human heart. So it's like you've got this heart, and maybe there's a divorce, you know, it changed color, and it's just invisible, and it kind of like sends you somewhere. And then there's haikus of spring, and, you know, I like to always tie whatever's going on to nature somehow, because that's what gives it its juice, you know. And it's us, but it's not us, but we can relate to it because we are natural. So I didn't prepare this too carefully, but I want to just say, I'll say 3 little haikus. One's for spring, one's for summer, and one's for autumn, and then I'm going to close with another poem by Jane Hirschfield. Spring. Yes, spring has come. This morning, a nameless hill is shrouded in mist. Totally beautiful, right? And that works for love. Imagine just sitting on a little hill with a shrouded mist, looking at it together. Maybe you can come up with your own name. I mean, it's just simple. All you have to do is open up to them and remember the nature. Here's a summer one. I'm going out, flies, so relax. Make love. Yeah. And here's one for autumn. But again, you know, it's like it has a resonance. It's just talking about that, but it's, you know, there's an echo. As I dig for wild orchids in the autumn fields, it is the deeply bedded root that I desire, not the flower. Okay, so that's already getting into autumn kind of thing. And I loved what you said, Barry, about this twin reality of love and death and mortality and transience and the poignancy that comes from knowing that this is fleeting, like a bubble or a rainbow or a dream. In Jewish ritual, and that's sort of the tradition I came from originally, in the happiest moment, you always say Kaddish, which is the prayer for the dead. And when you're at a very difficult time, like a memorial service or Shiva, there's always an exaltation, a sense of joy, because you always have the one and the other. And I think that my fellow celebrants will agree that the most satisfying and gratifying of ceremonies are ones that approach what's happening from as much of the circle as possible. It's this and it's that. It's this and that. You just bring it all toward yourself, and you express it in a way that people just know if you do it with an open heart, and you've got to do that. I mean, that's part of the job description. And you've got to be able to look foolish, right? So So here's a poem that I like. It could be for a funeral, but it could be for a wedding too if you really want to bring people down. But this is the idea. This is just an excerpt by Jane Hirschfield, a wonderful poet out in Marin County. Tenderness does not choose its own uses. It goes out to everything equally. Circling rabbit and hawk, look in the iron bucket. A single nail, a single ruby, all the heavens and hells. They rattle in the heart and make one sound. So, that's what I have to say. Thank you.